Brian Callahan is building an elite coaching staff for the Tennessee Titans. I'll go over all the latest hires on today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast. Let's get it.
You are Locked On Titans, your daily Tennessee Titans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Titans podcast. I am your host, Tyler Rowland. Titans fans, today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Brian Callahan is building an elite coaching staff exactly how I wanted him to do so. We got more hiring news over the weekend. I'm going to go over all the latest, including OC, some assistants on the defensive side, and talk about why, of course, this is the perfect way to build the coaching staff. Before we get into all of that, thank you for making the Locked On Titans podcast your first listen each and every day. Remember, Monday through Friday, Tennessee Titans content all year round, always for free. You're not going to beat that anywhere else. Make sure you get subscribed, stay subscribed to the number one Tennessee Titans podcast in the world. Shout out to my everydayers out there tuning in Monday through Friday. Couldn't do it without you guys. And if you aren't an everydayer, you need to be one. Throw a thumbs up on the video right now as well. Show's always free. All I ask for in return is the press of a button. But with that being said, let's dive into the content here again. Brian Callahan is building an elite coaching staff in the perfect way possible. So I talked about having young, innovative minds who understand the modern NFL, but you need to balance that with having experienced coaches who have been around the block, who are good teachers, who know the NFL, who Brian Callahan can lean on. We know, all of us, if you've ever had a job, and if you haven't had a job, well, congratulations to you. Don't ever hope that you have to do that. Stay as long as you can. All right. But with that being said, anybody who's ever had a first job or their first time doing a job knows you cannot be fully prepared. You can prepare as much as possible, have all the education, have the job shadowing, have an internship, all of that. But until you actually do the job, you cannot be ready for all of the adversity that you will face. So who will Brian Callahan, who's 39 years old, lean on when times get tough, when he faces that adversity and he faces things he's not prepared for yet that you can only learn by doing it? He needs experienced people on the staff, and that's exactly what he's done here. But we got to start with the offensive coordinator hire, which is not that kind of move. And a ton of people out there are calling the hire of Nick Holz as the offensive coordinator a buddy hire. All right, look, Nick Holz did play with Brian Callahan at De La Salle High School. They are buddies. They are friends. No doubt about it. But after that, they went their separate ways entirely. It's not like these two dudes have been joined at the hip since they left high school. Now, we will say Nick Holz got his first coaching opportunity at a high level at Nebraska when Bill Callahan was the head coach. From there, he spent time as an offensive assistant with Stanford. Then he went to the Oakland Raiders, almost said Las Vegas, but they were Oakland then. The Oakland Raiders in 2012. He learned under John Gruden. He learned under a ton of great coaches, including Jack Del Rio at the time as well. He focused primarily on wide receivers. He focused primarily on offense, but a ton of good years with the Oakland Raiders. Then in 2022, he becomes the offensive coordinator of UNLV, the college, and then he does such a great job that he's pulled back into the NFL by Doug Peterson with the Jacksonville Jaguars in 2023 to be their passing game coordinator. And look, I know a lot of people are going to be like, well, the Jaguars offense wasn't that great in 2023. Well, it was a whole lot better, a Holtz lot better than the Titans passing game. And if you look at some of the numbers from early in the season, before Trevor Lawrence got hurt, before Christian Kirk, their best wide receiver, was hurt, they were a lot better in 2023 in the passing game than they were in 2022. And anecdotally, if you want to go back to that Week 18 game, how many throws did Trevor Lawrence miss to wide open wide receivers? Okay, so at the end of the day, you can call Nick Holz a buddy hire if you want, but he's had 17 years of NFL experience. And shout out to my guy, Zach Lyons from F Words. Matt LaFleur became an offensive coordinator after 14 years of NFL experience. Kevin O'Connell, the head coach of the Minnesota Vikings, only 4 years of NFL experience. Liam Cohen only has 12 years. Mike LaFleur, only 12 years. Arthur Smith, only 12 years. Bobby Slowick, only 9. Mike McDaniel, 17. And Nick Holz, 17. So out of all of those coaches, Nick Holz is tied with Mike McDaniel for the most NFL experience as a coach. So this may be a buddy hire. Look, you go around the NFL, you look at all the coaching staffs, every single head coach is going to hire people who he has relationships with, who he has connections with, who is associated with his network. So we talk about it being a buddy hire, but at the end of the day, Nick Holz is someone who separated from Brian Callahan after high school and went his own way, went his own path, and developed his own career without being involved with Brian Callahan at all. And here's the final point I want to make here of why I am totally fine with this hire. When Titans fans think of offensive coordinator, we think of how important Arthur Smith was, how terrible Todd Downing was after that, the meh of Tim Kelly, all right? We think about that. The offensive coordinator position is a totally different position under Brian Callahan. All right, it's totally different than what offensive coordinator was under Mike Vrabel. The Titans have their offensive builder, their play caller in their head coach in Brian Callahan. He is going to build the offense from the ground up. He is going to call the plays. He is going to design the game plans. That is what the offensive coordinator did under Mike Vrabel. We have a head coach who specializes in that now. So what you need from your offensive coordinator is entirely different. You don't need those qualities from the offensive coordinator. What you need from the offensive coordinator is someone who can deliver your message, someone who you trust implicitly to communicate your vision to the players. The offensive coordinator is not so much a play caller, a play designer, an offensive structure builder. The offensive coordinator under Brian Callahan is a teacher, an instructor, a communicator, a liaison between the head coach to the players. Remember Arthur Smith? A bunch of different coaches got fired and hired, and they kept Arthur Smith around. Well, you look at the time with the Raiders, according to Peter Schrager, Nick Holz was beloved in Oakland and was kept by multiple coaching staffs because of his ability to communicate and teach. So I get that this hire may not be the number one hire that Titans fans look at and get excited about, and some people out there will be negative and call it a buddy hire, but at the end of the day, Nick Holz has earned his stripes without the Callahans, has a ton of NFL experience, and what is demanded of the offensive coordinator and what you want from your offensive coordinator is different now that we have Brian Callahan as the head coach than it was with Mike Vrabel as the head coach. So is it an over-the-moon reaction from me? No, but those people who are calling it a buddy hire is a way to absolutely hate on the hire. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't line up. And you look at everything we've gone over here, his ability to teach, his ability to communicate, his ability to be that liaison between Brian Callahan and the offense is absolutely critical. You need trust in someone who you know will deliver the message the way you want it delivered, how it has to be delivered. And that's what the Titans are getting in Nick Holz as their offensive coordinator. But again, this is an elite coaching staff coming together because of the diversity of the coaching staff, not necessarily in the ways that you're thinking about it, but in terms of experience. So I'm going to go over the other hires that happened on the defensive side of the ball here in just a moment. Before I do, though, do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by DoorDash. DoorDash always delivers. I mean that literally and figuratively. Whether you need a meal, whether it's groceries, whether it's retail items, DoorDash is going to come through in the clutch for you. And speaking of in the clutch, we got the big game coming up this weekend, whether it be pregame, whether it be halftime, the 2-minute warning, or in the clutch. DoorDash is going to deliver for you. And you, right now, can get 50% off up to a $10 value. When you spend $15 or more on your first order, all you got to do is download the DoorDash app, enter the code 23. That's LOCKED23, subject to change. Terms apply. Again, don't forget to use the code LOCKED23 for 50% off up to a $10 value on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and spend $15 or more, subject to change. Terms apply. Also, today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers to roof racks to exhaust kits to LED headlights, the things I've never even heard of. They are going to have you at eBay Motors, whether you're into speed, power, or style. eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Titans fans, let's continue today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast. Brian Callahan is building an elite coaching staff for the Tennessee Titans. We just talked about Nick Holz being hired as the offensive coordinator and why the reaction to that was mixed from the fan base. I think it was an excellent move because the offensive coordinator position just requires different things with Brian Callahan as the head coach compared to Mike Vrabel. But that's not the main reason why I think Brian Callahan is building an elite coaching staff. Again, I talked about the diversity of the coaching staff. And when people hear the diversity word, they think, race, ethnicity, all of that. That's not necessarily what I mean. While I like the diversity from a race perspective for the Titans right now, we'll get into that now. I like that. It's me more about experience and the type of experience that these coaches bring to the table. Again, you got young, innovative coaches like Brian Callahan, like Nick Holz, like Denard Wilson, but you balance that out with experienced coaches, and the Titans hired two of them over the weekend on the defensive side of the ball. Before I get into those hires, do want to thank you guys again for making the Locked On Titans podcast your first listen each and every day. Remember, Monday through Friday, Tennessee Titans content all year round, always for free. Make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed to the number one Tennessee Titans podcast in the world. But with that being said, the first hire that I want to talk about here is Steven Jackson, defensive backs coach, came from the Atlanta Falcons. Some really, really cool connections here. So Steven Jackson played defensive back for the Oilers and the Titans from 1991 to 1999. And that's why on the rundown on the side of the show, I'm calling these homecoming assistants. All right. Because both of the defensive assistants that we're going to talk about here have connections to the organization already. So you love that. Not only did Jackson play for the Titans in the 90s, but he was an assistant defensive back coach in 2016 and 2017. Again, the big thing for me here is the diversity of experience. Jackson has 20 years of NFL experience. And when we talk about the innovation, the young guys, the experience, for me, the Titans don't need some of these assistant coaches that they've hired. They don't need them to be innovators. They don't need them to be on the cutting edge. What their job is to teach the players. And when you have a former NFL player who played in Tennessee, who coached in Tennessee with 20 years of experience teaching NFL players how to play the position, that is absolutely huge. Denard Wilson needs to be the innovative guy, the play caller. But what you need there, like I said with Nick Holz, you need someone who can properly teach your vision to the players, who can gain their respect, who can garner their buy-in. And that is exactly what Steven Jackson is going to be able to do. So one thing I want to point out with both of these hires that we're going to talk about here. People in Atlanta My guy from Locked On Falcons, Aaron Freeman, there was another beat reporter for the Atlanta Falcons who mentioned this over the weekend. Steven Jackson was a guy that people in Atlanta wanted to keep on Raheem Morris's staff. They wanted to keep him around because of what he was able to do coaching the young people in the secondary. Look at a guy like Jeff Okudah, who was a top pick in the first round, who was a bust in Detroit. Came over, and at the beginning of the season, in the first half of the season before injury, Jeff Okudah was playing excellent football. Who's a first-round cornerback bust that the Titans could really use to maybe come around? Maybe Caleb Farley? Well, I think Caleb Farley's ultimately cut. But hey, maybe they give it a shot and see what Steven Jackson could do. The Titans are going to be bringing in new cornerbacks this year. You still have a guy in Roger McCreary who's in his rookie contract. Steven Jackson is a guy who spends time primarily with cornerbacks. And again, that's where the Titans need so much help. So they're prioritizing guys that help in the positions where they need the most. And Steven Jackson, with his experience, a Clark Phillips as well in Atlanta. Steven Jackson was able to get the best out of him. So I really love this hire. This is exactly what I was talking about when I said that Brian Callahan needed to surround himself not only with innovative young coaches, but experienced older coaches who aren't so concerned with climbing up the ladder, but are more concerned with teaching and molding young players. This is a huge hire. Love that. And not only that, followed up by another former Atlanta Falcons assistant, and Frank Bush, linebacker coach. He was a linebacker again for the Houston Oilers in 1985 and 1986, has been in the NFL since 1993. 30 years of coaching experience. The amount of players, the different kinds of players that you would be involved with and that you would be coaching throughout that time makes him uniquely qualified. Also, he was a Titans linebacker coach in 2011 and 2012. So again, a homecoming for these assistant coaches. He was a linebacker coach for the Los Angeles Rams from 2013 to 2016, where he worked with Rand Carthon. You look at some of the guys in Atlanta, Nate Landman, and I talked to my guy from Locked On Falcons to kind of get the lowdown on his thoughts, and he pointed out Jeff Okudah, Clark Phillips, Nate Landman as guys who absolutely benefited from the teachings of Jackson and Bush. And again, there are tons of people in Atlanta who wanted to keep these guys on the coaching staff because of their ability to teach to younger players. Talk about assistant coaches. You don't need scheme innovations. You need someone who can properly deliver the message to these players. Absolutely critical for the Tennessee Titans to get guys who are good teachers with a ton of NFL experience who can buoy and support and help a guy in Denard Wilson. Speaking of Wilson, Frank Bush spent time with Denard Wilson with the New York Jets in 2019 and 2020. So connections, relationships, trust, absolutely key. I love the experience that's been added to this coaching staff in the last few days. And I'm going to dive into a big picture conversation about every name we know on the coaching staff right now, and one name that you need to keep your eye on going forward this week. So I'm going to dive into that in just a moment. Before I do, though, I do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Happy Super Bowl to all those who celebrate from FanDuel. Again, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is all about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks, and placing some super bets. I am putting a lot of money on Kansas City. I am putting a lot of money on Isaiah Pacheco to have a big day. FanDuel has so many ways to end the season with a W or 2 or 3. You can bet Super Bowl 58 with the spread, the money line, again, player props, touchdown scores, how many points will be scored, all a great time. And new customers who join today can get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Titans fans, let's cap off today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast. We talked about Nick Holz being hired as the OC, and just so I correct myself, it's Nick Holz, like Lou Holtz, the old coach from Notre Dame, not Nick Holz, okay? It's pronounced Holtz. Cleared that up with the Titans media group just to make sure. I want to get that right. So Nick Holtz, the hiring of Nick Holtz, why some people didn't like it, but I think the reaction is overblown because of the different demands of offensive coordinator. We talked about some homecoming hires with assistant coaches on the defensive side of the ball and why their experience and their ability to teach is so critical. Now I want to kind of zoom back out here and talk about the entire coaching staff and what we know and why it is a perfect staff for the Titans. Before we get into it, I do want to thank you guys again for making the Locked On Titans podcast your first listen each and every day. But I also want to let you know that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. It's called Locked On Sports Today. It's here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts from Locked On. Plus, you get coverage of every league from our national shows like Locked On NFL, which I do on Thursdays. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. I had a lot of you guys actually reach out and say you enjoy the 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. You can just throw it on, kind of background noise, tap in when you want to. I do want to take a quick moment, though, and thank all of you. Thank all of you even more than ever. I had the most massive month in January, had shows 10,000, 16,000, had the biggest show I've ever had on YouTube ever when Brian Callahan was hired. Last week, I did 7 episodes with 2 bonus episodes, and you guys tapped in every single time. There is a reason that this is the #1 Tennessee Titans podcast in the world by far, and it's because of y'all. So thank you all so much. But again, this is an elite coaching staff, and Brian Callahan is building this the perfect way, building this exactly how I wanted him to do it. So, of course, you have Brian Callahan at the top of the snake, 39 years old, innovative, offensive coach, quarterback guru, offensive builder. He's going to build the game plan, build the offensive system from the ground up. He's going to call the plays, all that. On the defensive side of the ball, you have Denard Wilson, who is literally the same exact thing as Brian Callahan, but on the defensive side of the ball. He was the most interviewed, most highly requested defensive coordinator candidate in this hiring cycle in the NFL. So you get Brian Callahan on offense, and you get the defensive Brian Callahan on defense. Absolutely beautiful. Then you bring in Nick Holz, who can deliver that message, who can be that liaison between the head coach and the players, another young guy who understands the modern landscape of the NFL. But then, now that you have Holtz, Callahan, Wilson, you have the young, innovative coaches who understand how things are done in the modern NFL. Now you supplement them with wisdom and experience with, of course, at the top of the list, Bill Callahan, maybe the most important position coaching hire in the entire NFL this year. Again, I talked about it last week. The Tennessee Titans are now a destination where coaches want to go. Denard Wilson picked the Titans over 3 other teams. Bill Callahan left the Browns to come join his son in Tennessee. Wisdom, experience, former head coach, went to a Super Bowl with the Raiders. Perfect for these young coaches to lean on when they have questions, when they have concerns, when they hit adversity. This is how you do it. You can't have a whole coaching staff of young, innovative minds. You can't have a whole coaching staff of guys who are dying to be a head coach and can't wait to leave. You need guys who you can trust, who you know can teach and have experience in different circumstances that you can lean on. You add in another name, Tyke Tolbert, who could have went to 2 other places, but chose to go with the Titans and be their wide receiver coach. Another guy with nearly 20 years of NFL experience, who is a teacher who has worked with some of the best wide receivers over the last 20 years. I mean, this is exactly what I'm talking about. The diversity of experience, the diversity of wisdom. And then you go to the defensive side of the ball. You have Denard Wilson, who's 41, but a young coach who's a first-time defensive coordinator. And you give him 2 guys who have played in the NFL with over 20 years of coaching experience, and Steven Jackson and the defensive backs to coach those cornerbacks, and then Frank Bush to coach the linebackers. So you have your 3 young, innovative coaches. And then you supplement them with 4 experienced, super tenured coaches. This is what I was talking about when I talked about building a diverse coaching staff. Like, this is excellent. You have guys who have been in the NFL for decades. Guys, even in Nick Holz and Brian Callahan, who've been in the NFL for over a decade, but are still young and innovative and are willing to be forward thinking. Not that the older coaches aren't, but it's just good to have that balance, okay? And this isn't even the entire coaching staff. And it's already got some, and I think it's incredible that the Titans said we need wide receiver help, offensive line help, we need defensive backfield help, and we need to build our quarterback up and support our quarterback. You get Brian Callahan, quarterback whisperer. You get Nick Holz and Tyke Tolbert, who are wide receiver specialists. You get Bill Callahan, the best offensive line coach in the NFL. Then you bring in Denard Wilson, who is a passing game specialist and a defensive backs coach. And then you bring in Frank Bush and Steven Jackson, who specialize in the back 7. And a lot of people credit Frank Bush, especially, with solidifying the middle of the field and pass coverage for the Falcons. So middle of the field pass coverage, Frank Jackson coaching the cornerbacks, Denard Wilson, a safeties specialist, Bill Callahan on the offensive line, Tyke Tolbert, Nick Holz, wide receiver, and Brian Callahan, quarterback. All of the 5 biggest spots that the Tennessee Titans need help at, they went out and prioritized specialists at those spots. Elite coaching staff, and not just guys who the Titans could get, guys who wanted to come to the Titans. Absolutely huge. I do want to leave you with one last little, put a feather in the cap here, put a marker in here, put a bookmark in this. Tom Jones was an assistant to the head coach. Always makes me think of assistant to the regional manager. Hilarious. But Tom Jones spent 25 years as an executive, player personnel, assistant to the head coach, all that with the Oakland Raiders and Las Vegas Raiders. He was just let go, and word is that he is going to be joining Brian Callahan in Tennessee to help be a liaison, big word for today, liaison, between the coaching staff and the scouts and the organization, someone who could be that guy who's telling Brian Callahan whether to go for it, helping him with game management situations. Hey, we need to take a timeout here. Hey, we need to maybe look how to manage the time in this way, help make those decisions. Instead of having Stryker or whatever for Mike Vrabel, who's his little teacher's pet, you're getting a guy who has 25 years, not only in game management decisions, but also in player personnel. Tom Jones. Keep that name in mind. If that actually happens the way we think it might, I'll confirm that later on in the week. But again, an elite coaching staff, diversity on the staff. And again, I talk about the wisdom and experience, but you have diversity in race as well. And I think with how diverse an NFL locker room is, that is critical as well to be properly represented. And again, it's something that some people don't care. Some people, it makes them upset. For me, I'm proud that my Tennessee Titans coaching staff looks the way that it does, whether we're talking about age and experience or whether we're talking about diversity of race. I love what the Titans are building here. I love what Brian Callahan is building here. Makes me incredibly excited for this season, incredibly excited for the future to come. And I'm going to be here to break it all down with you guys each and every day. That is going to do it, though, for me today, folks. I'll be back with you guys tomorrow, of course. As always, I am your host, Tyler Rowland, and this was Locked On Titans.